This is Trend Following Radio, where great thinking comes alive. Nobel Prize winners, legendary traders, best-selling authors, and the pros that know what drive us irrational human beings. I am your host, Michael Covel. Not filtered, raw, honest. That's my passion. Before I jump into this best of episode today, following Black Friday, following Cyber Monday, I too have an offer. You can check out my full products, my training, my courses, my systems at trendfollowing.com/products. And I have a new product, my professional product, which has my new library in it. Now, all of my prior clients will have a special offer to upgrade. New clients, if you are on my email list, will be in the middle of a webinar right now. But if you happen to not be in the middle of this webinar and you would like information on this new product to possibly purchase, send me an email, michael@covel.com. That's COVEL.com. Now, following up after Thanksgiving week, Mark Minervini, trader extraordinaire, reaching back into my archives, and Greg Zuckerman, a Wall Street Journal reporter who had a fabulous book about the trader Jim Simons. 2 classic episodes back to back. If you can't learn something from these 2 episodes, I don't know what to do with you. Just give up. And a quick final reminder, if you would like to know about my products and services, specifically my training, my systems, to get you to be a trend-following trader, drop me an email, michael@covel.com. Those end-of-the-year specials that you may want are underway right now. Without any further delay, let's jump right into these back-to-back episodes. I hope you enjoy. A repeat guest today, one of my favorites, a very plain-spoken, logical thinker, motivational, Mark Minervini. Today, Mark and I discuss his newest book, Mindset Secrets for Winning, How to Bring Personal Power to Everything You Do. For those of you that recall, Mark was first featured in one of Jack Schwager's Market Wizards books, very well known for his trading prowess. But today, a slightly different detour, and I respect that Mark has gone down a different path with this book than a pure trading book. It really is one of those books where you have no excuses. You take the wisdom or you don't take the wisdom. That's life. On, off, A, B, your choice. Without any further delay, let's jump right into my conversation with Mark Minervini.
How's it going? How you been?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Everything's going great. Just trying to stay healthy. That's the only thing that I really care about at this point. My family and my health.
Well, it's funny you say that. I think I revolve my life around health. That's my starting point. Like, I really don't do any work for the day, so to speak, until I've thought about what I'm going to do for my health that day.
Yeah, that was my goal many, many years ago. I wanted to become wealthy because I wanted to have the freedom to, I used to say, I want my biggest decision of the day to be what I'm going to eat. Maybe have a nice garden and go out and pick my vegetables and eat healthy foods, healthy greens that I grow myself. My why for even trading wasn't about money. It was about what money could do, and it was about health and freedom and living a better life.
I think till most people get a little money, sometimes they imagine all these other things, and then once they have a little money, they realize, well, okay, it really wasn't that.
Exactly. I used to always want toys and cars and things. I was never really a very materialistic person, but I always dreamt about those things. Then when I could able to afford them, then I didn't want them. Then they just seemed like a burden.
Isn't it funny? I am envious sometimes if I flip on YouTube and I see a show of Jay Leno and all his cars. But then I say to myself, to be Jay Leno and to have his 500 cars and whatnot, he's put his 50 million or 100 million investing in this whole thing. But that's going to own you to some degree. That's a lot of responsibility to have all those things.
Oh yeah, it's something else. I know. I was just watching him the other day. He's got that show. I don't know if you saw it. It's on reruns now, like on Netflix, where he drives around with celebrities and interviews them. Oh no, actually no, that was
Seinfeld. That's great too. That's a great show as well. Yeah.
the other car guy. The other car guy. Yeah, and he was like driving around with Eddie Murphy and various people.
If money is absolutely no object, I can understand having all the toys and all that kind of stuff, but it does own you. You know, I wanted to start today, though. I was looking through my Twitter feed, and I thought it was such a great proverb to start with. I saw it this morning, and it was, I think it's on some handle called Zen Essentials. Very simple. The obstacle is the path, a famous Zen proverb. Isn't that so true? Now, if you were to hear that, you were to start to break it down for people. The obstacle's the path. That makes no sense. What do you mean the obstacle's the path? I'm overweight, or I want to learn this, or this is hard. But the obstacle is the path, isn't it?
Yeah, the process is the path. The path is the path. I mean, it's that's all you have is the path. The destination, you hit the destination, it's over. The whole idea is the path, is the journey. But you try to get that destination, so you're constantly trying to strive to that destination that you forget about the process. That's sort of what my whole book's about, is staying in process, learning how to get the process right, and then the result happens automatically.
That's so difficult to bring across to people, whether you're talking business, sports, life. It is the process. The outcome, okay, you can't control that, but you can control your process.
Yeah. You certainly can.
How do you start to bring people into an understanding of process? Because you've laid it out right there at the beginning. This is really important to you, and it's really important just to be effective in life. How do you start to explain your mindset for process?
I always explain it like this. I tell people, if you were to look at the top of a mountain, let's say you were looking at the top of Mount Everest, and you started thinking about climbing it, you might not even try because it just looks so daunting. But if you were to break it down and to think about climbing up maybe to the first base camp and then resting, then thinking about how you would climb to the next base camp and start stringing that together in your mind, you could then see yourself climbing it and you could attempt it. It's all about how you frame the challenge. If you're looking at the result, especially if it's a very lofty goal, it could seem so far away. So you're not creating that expectancy. Also, it takes a number of steps to get to anything great. No one gets to anything great overnight. You really have to break it down and stay in that and trust that that process is going to get you to that destination. If you keep looking at the destination, your eye's not on the ball. You can't look at the scoreboard and then hit a fastball coming over the plate.
I mean, if you don't trust the process, you just look at that destination, you'll never get there. You'll just spin your wheels, so to speak. So many people will do that in their entire life on all of their decision making. They will just see the outcome, imagine the outcome, and sit on the couch for 30 years imagining the outcome as time goes by.
That person will say, I've tried everything and I've worked hard. They might have worked really hard, maybe even harder than somebody else who's attained it. Working hard doesn't necessarily get you to your goal because you may be working so hard that you're actually over trying. And when you over try, that's where you get out of process. I used to do this when I went into competitions. More recently, I shoot in shooting competitions now. When I first started going, I started shooting competitions quite late in my life when I was 50. So certainly something that I took up late in life. I would be so concerned with, I can't finish worse than fourth or fifth. I got to be in the top five, got to be in the top five. And then, as soon as I made one mistake during the competition, which you're inevitably going to do, I was like, oh no, that's it. I'm out of that. I'm probably in sixth or seventh now. And then it was just like a total spiral. I just changed the whole thing and just said, I'm not even going to be concerned where I finish. My goal was to just be the best I could that day. And in the face of anything that happens, continuously just give it my best. Even if I completely blow it for the first half of the day will then be the absolute best I can for the second half of the day. Then later on, go take a look at the scoreboard and say, I wonder where I finished. All of a sudden, I started finishing much better, and then I started winning.
I was milling around your world in advance of this call, and I thought I caught something about shooting, and I thought I saw a small video. Where did this start? Explain to me. What are you doing? I want to know the details. I want the nitty gritty. Go back to the beginning on the shooting. I want to know when the shift happened, how it happened, why it happened, where did it start, what was the influence, what was the inspiration?
It's not like just sitting there very boringly and shooting at a stagnant target. You're running as fast as you can, and you're going through obstacle courses. You've got to think and you've got to plan. It's very, very fast. So it's aerobic, and it's sort of like an obstacle course while you're shooting. So it's very challenging. And a friend of mine was doing it and asked me to go with him to watch. I said, I'm really not interested in that. I don't think that's going to be boring for me. So I went and watched it, and I said, wow, this is actually pretty cool. You're running around, and it's a lot of thinking and a lot of pressure. I like being under pressure. I lived my whole life under pressure with trading and a lot of things that I've done with sports. He said, you should try it. Anyway, I borrowed some equipment and I tried it. My very first time I came in I think it was 8th place out of 40 people. And he's like, you're pretty good at this. I mean, you did really good. You could probably be good if you spent some time. I fell in love with it. Now I have my own range that I train on.
How long have you been at it?
I don't know, 4 years now, maybe. Not a long time. Started when I was about 50. I'll be 55 in January.
Did you have any shooting experience before that?
Long, long time ago when I was a kid, I used to shoot shotguns. I shot skeet and trap. Completely different. Nothing to do with pistols. I always found it boring because anything I ever saw was just sitting with stationary targets. So this was all new to me. And this is big, in Texas and in the South. Shooting is big, of course, and these competitions are worldwide. It's something that I love now, and it's super challenging, and just another thing that I decided to take on a new challenge.
Let me keep you at this for a moment. Let's talk about the process of becoming better at it. I'm sure there's a lot of self-practice. How have you received mentorship? Has it been observing other people, YouTube videos? Has it been in-person instruction? How has your process been to get better at this?
I definitely have a process that how I approach virtually anything that I attempt that is something new. Of course, with YouTube and with social media, you have information overload now. You have almost too much information. At one time, we had no information. I played the drums my whole life. We used to have to take the record and go back and play it, move the needle back 1,000 times to figure out a part. Now you go on YouTube and the person who wrote that part is teaching you. It's a lot easier to learn now. Of course, I'm fortunate that I've got the means to be able to hire good mentors. I try to find the best there is in the world, and that's what I did with shooting. I went to some of the best people in the world, spend a lot of time with them, but I made sure I got the right information right away. And I did the same thing with my photography. I took a look at it, and it wasn't looking like I was hoping. I realized that step one was realize that I sucked at it, and I needed to find somebody really great that could teach me how to not suck. Just going off of guns for a minute with my photography, and it's the same thing with the guns. It's exactly the same process. I hired this photographer who shot for Vogue. He was in Miami. I loved his work. I called him up and I said, hey, I would love to have you spend some time with me. I'm willing to pay you for a weekend. He said to me, well, let me ask you a question. I'd like to see your photos. So I sent them to him. He said, I don't ask you a question. I saw your photos. Are you willing to admit that you suck? So I said to him, you came to the right guy, because I already think I suck. So he said, okay, well, then I'll spend some time with you. It's the same thing that I tell people all the time. You have to realize that you're not at the place you want to be. You're not an expert at it maybe now, and you've got to empty your cup. Find somebody who is worthy of filling your cup, but you got to allow them to fill it and have an empty cup. I go to the best there is with an empty cup and say, here, teach me, and I'm going to listen to everything and do it exactly like you say. Then it's a lot of practice and a lot of going over the stuff over and over until you master it. It takes years to master virtually anything. That's the starting point, though, is to get the right advice and also the right equipment. For instance, I made sure that I got really good lenses and a good camera, so I couldn't look at somebody else's work and go, oh, yeah, he's got a $2,000 lens. That's why it looks like that. Oh, he's got a better camera than me. I remove all the excuses, get the best equipment, get the best training, and now it's all on you.
I have an ego question. When I talk to many people, let's say people that have not had a chance to achieve like you have achieved yet, many people, when they're still facing the idea of their first achievement, the ego seems to be the biggest burden when I observe. Like, just can't admit what you just said. I suck. I need help. Whereas I feel the same way. And I feel like so many times on this podcast, I get a chance to talk to all these brilliant people, have these niche understandings that I don't know about, get to ask them questions. But what is it about so many people when they're starting out and they're facing that kind of, God, I want to get that first achievement, that the ego just prevents them from asking for help?
I think I have figured that out. Thank God over the years, it took me a long, long time to escape that trap. You want to figure it out for yourself. When you're a kid, you don't want any help. You want to make maybe your dad proud or your whoever, your coach proud. You want to figure it out for yourself. You want to show them. You want to show the people that taught you or the people that you look up to that you're good. You want to show them that I did this myself. You take that with you. But that doesn't mean that you don't need a coach, and figuring out yourself. Part of it is figuring it out by learning and getting that information. I don't know. At some point along the line in my life, I decided it was more important to be successful than it was to try to be right. And I realized that most things I wasn't going to figure out by myself, or it was going to take so long that why not just learn? That's the whole concept of life, is to do, achieve, learn the lessons, pass them on to other people. Then they get better and then they pass them on. And it's this perpetual torch that we pass. That is sort of one of the meanings of life.
I love something in your work where you say, as you talk about decision, that the most important decision is to decide. You have to decide. Deciding is the first important decision.
Well, you have to decide to decide.
It's the derivative of decision.
Making a decision is a decision. To decide means that, okay, this is it. Today, I'm done. I'm fed up. No more. Today, this is it. I'm never smoking again. I'm going to live healthy. I'm not going to think of myself as a fat person anymore. I'm going to think of myself as someone who is overweight. I can change my lifestyle, whatever it is. All right. I just use those two because they're the most common: quitting smoking, exercising, and eating right. These are things that, of course, challenge many people. The first thing is you have to make that decision. You have to decide that today's the day and draw the line in the sand. I did that with my trading. I was not making money for year after year after year after year. And then finally I said, I got to figure this out. I got to get good mentorship. I got to find out what the common denominators are, what I'm doing wrong. And then I realized I wasn't cutting my losses, that I was letting stocks blow up every now and then. That's what was causing all the problems. So I said, this is it. Today is the day. I am never, ever going to take a big loss ever again. And if I do blow myself up, if I do go broke, it's going to be, I'm going to take 1,000 small losses. I'm going to live and die by the sword. And that was it. And that's where everything changed from that point on for me, for my trading.
Very difficult for people to do. Until they hear someone like you say it and give them permission to think in a different way, the majority, the mob of society pushes most people to think the entirely opposite direction than you just described.
Yeah, well, it takes a level of confidence in the outcome. There has to be some expectancy in your mind. I got asked this question recently. I did my recent workshop, my annual workshop, about a week ago. I was asked about building expectancy, expecting good things to happen, and how you keep expecting something good when you're not doing very well. The difference between, I think, winning and losing a battle to get to a goal is, I think the winner, as they put in a year and nothing happens, they say, I'm a year closer. And then they put in a second year and a third year and they say, wow, I must be closer. I mean, I put in 3 whole years. Now, 6 years later, they're still not there. And they're going, it's got to be right around the corner. The other person who doesn't make it usually doesn't make it anywhere near that point, because after the first year they go, oh, I'm never going to get there. Another 6 months or a year they go, oh, this is just getting worse, and that's it. I'm not going to keep waiting. I wasted all this time. They're thinking about the time they wasted and looking back of how far they've come from where they started, as opposed to thinking how close they are to the goal. It's just building mental expectancy. I'm not even sure how I ended up on this topic with you, where you started with the question, but
Are there rules to our conversation? There's no rules, Mark.
no, none at all.
We're just following the path, following the trend. Hey, let me keep it at expectancy for a second. What I find interesting about it, and I guess, and you can correct me if you've got a different perspective, when I hear you describe expectancy, I hear someone that sounds like they're describing a form of self-confidence, a self-belief. What I find interesting about it, when you have that perspective and people feel it, especially in person, that can sometimes scare people. It can intimidate them. Other people can feel jealous. Maybe they can think, oh, Mark, he's just cocky. But it's not that. Deep down, I think when people truly see somebody that has that expectancy, they might feel all these other things, but it's really, they want it too. They just don't know how to get it. And sometimes I think they might, how is this guy, Mark, why is he so confident? Where does he get this expectancy from? Why does he have it? They just can't figure it out. It's all in the mind. It's just a decision in the mind.
Well, don't think for a second along that way I didn't want to quit 800 times and I wasn't crying and kicking and screaming. And I mean, it's not easy. And I struggled and struggled and struggled and felt like quitting so many times and was completely demoralized. But the difference is that I would constantly look at people who did it. Many times there was people who started off worse off than me. Again, removing the excuses, here's someone who started with less than me and they did it. So I just said, that's just a man, just like me. I had a belief in the process. So I just learned, what is that process? What's the process that that person followed? I made an unconditional commitment. It's a trust. It's a trust in learning. It's a trust in being able to learn. I know I have a brain and my brain is healthy and I know I can learn. And as long as I can learn and I'm willing to learn, I can self-correct. And over time, I'm going to get to where I need to get. Again, you have to get off the destination and a timeline. Unconditional persistence means you persist until, and there is no quit. That's what's hard, I think, for most people. But if you love what you're doing, it's a lot easier.
Now, you've laid out some interesting things in this conversation. You've said your age, early to mid 50s. You've talked about something new like shooting, something new like photography. You sound like a teenager. Now, other people are sitting around at your same age and they're thinking about, what are my pension benefits? Oh my God, my legs hurt. I can't move. I can't do this. This is such mindset. Why in the world should any of us have anything other than an open-minded teenager's perspective for our entire life? I mean, right? How do you have it?
Well, I feel like I am sort of ultra conservative, even though I've done a lot of things and I've been described as a Renaissance man many times. I know people that are in their 70s and 80s that are doing Ironman competitions and are my heroes. There's a gentleman by the name of Jerry Rothaus who just came to my workshop just last week. He's got a website. I think it's called sweatingseniors.com. If you see what this guy's doing in his 70s, holy cow, I feel like
we're slackers, huh?
Yeah, I'm a slacker. I told him, he came up to me and he asked me to sign my new book. When I signed the book, I said, you are my hero. I signed the book, but it was awesome to see him. I always look at the people that are doing more than me and always try to keep company of people that are better than me, and that keeps me going.
I'm only a few years younger than you, and I still enjoy going to the track every week and running sprints. I'm still pretty quick. I can go to YouTube and I can find, I think there's a pair of 100-year-old guys that are running the 100-meter dash in under 20 seconds. And you're just like, okay, you know what? I got a lot more work to do. Because these guys have got me and you by 50 years and they're still out there pushing the pavement.
Yeah, yeah. So let me ask you, what do you run the 40 in?
What do I run the 40 in now at 51? I'm sure I could be under 5 seconds.
I ran it 4.8 about 5 years ago. I haven't timed it since then, but a friend of mine's daughter was a track runner and she was like 15 years old. And he said, we were talking about it and he said, yeah, my daughter's fast. And I said, I bet you I could beat her. He was like, are you out of your mind? And she beat me, but she only beat me by 1/10 of a second. She ran like a 4.7 and I run a 4.8. I don't think I can come close to that right now. I'm in the last 5 years, I'm nowhere near. Once you hit 50, it seems to the warranty expires and things start breaking.
We're not going to let you allow to go that
Oh,
direction.
I'm not going to let it stop me. Believe me, I'm going to go down the street and the hubcaps are going to fly off and the wheels are going to fly off and I'm going to go down swinging. Don't worry. But I don't think I can under 5 seconds now.
Tom Brady is giving us all the inspiration, but I don't know if he can go under 5 seconds right now.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, just talking about running and people that inspire you to do more. Of course, when somebody does something, it shows you what is possible. Those are the heroes. Those are the leaders that show you what's possible. And then that shows you what you could maybe do and even exceed. We just had someone break the 2-hour marathon. You probably know about that. And watch what happens. I'll bet you within the next, I don't know, 6 months, few years, you're going to see other people break it. It's going to get broken. Just like the 4-minute mile. Right after the 4-minute mile got broken by Roger Bannister, all of a sudden, a bunch of people start breaking the 4-minute mile because that mental barrier got broken. That's what inspires me. That's what inspires the world. That's what inspires people. Humans are encoded to be better. There's no doubt that in 50 years we'll be faster and stronger, and in 100 years we'll be even faster and stronger than that and more intelligent.
You laid out something interesting a few minutes ago. You talked about how people want to figure it out on their own, kind of the puzzle thinking, which I think we all need to do to some degree. It is part of being human. It does feel nice to solve the puzzle. But running in parallel to our side of ourselves that's trying to figure out our own puzzle is all of this other side of the equation, which you can learn to think like such and such. So while we are figuring out the puzzle, we can't be oblivious to all of this learning that has taken place for thousands of years that we can pull from. Now, some people might be thinking, thousands of years, Mike? Well, you're crazy. Well, hold on. You and I talked about at the beginning of this conversation, I'd love you to go there as well, too, which is the Zen Buddhism mindset. I mean, where did that come from you for? I mean, how did you find that Zen Buddhist mindset? I mean, that's terribly important.
Happen to be Buddhist, and I don't even know if you know that, but I'm probably not the best person to really talk about or represent Buddhism. But when it comes to a Zen mindset, I just think of that as ease of movement and doing things that are efficient and effective. Again, you talked about figuring it out on your own. Look, even if you get taught by the best in the world, you still got to do 99% of the heavy lifting on your own. You got a coach that helps you and you practice to go to the Olympics. When you're on a 4-inch beam, 4 feet off the floor in front of the whole world and you've got a backflip, no one's there. It's all on your own. You still own your own success, but there's nothing wrong with pulling from a body of knowledge and then contributing to that same body of knowledge when you're done.
Yeah, it's kind of a theme of this conversation so far is like, how does one work on their self, but at the same time bring in the coaching, bring in the learning? It's a tricky balance to figure out.
I love to learn. I have right now, as we're speaking, in my office behind me, I have about 4,000 books in my library. And I've read every one of them, and I've read some of them 100 times. I reread books that I was reading 30 years ago. I reread now, and I've read them over and over and over, and I internalize them, and I come back to them. I love to learn. I love to be coached. I love to work with teams, with people that are better than me. I mean, I just find it enjoyable. I know some people, like I said, they want to figure it out themselves, but there's an enjoyment in learning from others.
Let's talk about excuses for a moment. A phrase from your work, you own it all. Don't we all own it? You own it all.
Yeah, you own it all. What I mean by that is some people say, well, how can you say that you create everything in your life? What if you get cancer or something? You're driving down the street and some random truck comes around the corner and hits you. Okay, maybe you didn't cause that. Maybe you did in some way that we don't understand. But let's just say you didn't. But let me ask you this. Do you now own the problem? Do you now own the result? Are you the one sitting in a wheelchair or in a hospital? You ultimately always become the owner. Ownership is empowering. If you exclaim that I am the creator, I create my experience, I create my life, well, then you automatically are the uncreator and the recreator. But you can't be that if you don't take that ownership.
We're sitting here as two guys that are talking about active things in this podcast. I am not averse to having the stoic mindset where I say to myself, okay, right now I can go do sprints. But what happens if I lose that ability? What happens if I get injured? What happens if I'm in a wheelchair? How will I deal? What can I do? I think the great thing about, for example, look at our communication. We're like 8,000 miles away. We have access to all this tech. The great thing about the modern age is if the physical stuff changes, you can still keep that gray matter engaged like you're one of the most accomplished achievers on the planet. It doesn't stop. There really is no excuse. And again, back to your point, you own it.
Yeah. I mean, just going to the technology, I learned a lot about photography from a photographer in Russia, which we Skyped. He would teach me over Skype. I know I digressed a little bit off of the point you were making, but just it struck me with the technology. I completely forgot where you are, where this is coming from. You're around the other side of the world.
It's just a fabulous thing that when one goes ahead and takes the ownership and kind of gets that as an exciting point, I own it and I'm going to do it. And it becomes exciting instead of a burden or something negative. It's awesome to own it.
Oh, yeah. Ownership is wonderful. The reason why we don't take ownership and we resort to blame is because we default to blame because it's like a hot potato. We have a problem and we want to pass the responsibility on to something else or someone else. Again, it's the ego. We look at it as blame. Blame and ownership are completely different. I say, well, you got to take responsibility. And I say, well, I'm not to blame for this. No. Responsibility is the ability to respond. You're acknowledging that you have the ability to respond. Blame means you're a victim and you don't have any ability to change anything. You don't have the ability to respond. You're just being victimized, and that's it. That's where it ends. Responsibility is knowing that you have the ability to respond. You choose what you do, what you say, and most of all, you choose what things mean to you. Even if something is perceived by somebody as negative, somebody else perceives it as a completely different challenge to them.
I want to shift you as we jump around your world and jump around your topics as we're digging through the mindset secrets for winning. Performing your best under pressure at these big moments. I would share with you my perspective. For example, I think these days, if I'm doing something that would be considered under pressure, it would be a speaking engagement before a decent crowd, a smart crowd. And I think a lot of people might think, wow, that feels, what do you have to do, Mike? How do you have to prep for that? I don't really prep any differently than I would prep before getting on a call with you. Even if I'm going to speak in front of 1,000 people, I just do my thing. And then when I walk out there, I don't feel any different than I feel talking to you. Speak to the preparation for a peak performance moment, how that unfolds for you, how you feel in those moments. You could use your gun example. You could use photography, anything you want to use.
Well, I always try to prepare as close to the scenario that I'm going to face. And that's where people go wrong. They practice one way under certain conditions, which are usually a lot more lenient, maybe a lot more repetitive. Like, for instance, if you just were in a batting cage hitting ball after ball after ball after ball, or maybe you were to go and practice a routine like before the Olympics, you practice a routine over and over and over, but then you go to the Olympics and you only have one chance to do it. Bridging the gap between how you practice and how you actually perform is really what's important. And that's the entire second half of my book is dedicated to mastering perfect practice. You've, of course, heard of deliberate practice. It takes 10,000 hours to master something. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. I think that can be shortened quite a bit. But you have to practice correctly. You definitely have to practice correctly. And most people practice incorrectly, and they don't practice under conditions, not just physical conditions, but mental conditions. Your mind, when you go to your performance or you go on that stage, is in the same place that it is right now with us just talking.
Yeah, it starts with the mindset. But you make a great point. For example, you mentioned the batting cage. I spent 10 years of my life understanding how it works. Live pitching and the batting cage are two different animals. The batting cage is needed. You could go into a batting cage and you could master hitting 95-mile-an-hour fastballs, but I guarantee you that if you showed up in the World Series right now, you'd strike out every damn time.
it's a whole nother story, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And why is that? It's exactly the same physical task. It's your mind. It's your mindset, of course, and how you deal with pressure. You can go in the batting cage and get the repetition to get the physical habit and get the physical repetitions down. But when you go to that big event where everybody's watching you and it's all on the line, that's where we go back to what's encoded in us from thousands and thousands of years ago of always being on the lookout for what's wrong. When the average person looks in the mirror, they see what's wrong. My nose is too big. My eyes are too small. My breasts are too small. I'm bald. Whatever it is, we immediately start finding fault. That's because we're programmed. We're programmed to look for problems as a mechanism to ensure our safety and our security. Because at one time, we're walking around at risk of getting eaten alive and getting attacked. It's been encoded just like an alligator comes out of that shell snapping. It's encoded in their DNA.
You know, Mark, you keep doing your thing, okay? Your thing might change. You've mentioned many activities that you're involved in. For a lot of people, they worry about what other people think of them. I don't think you, Mark, have that anymore, really. I'm guessing you don't. I don't really feel like I do. I mean, maybe on some small area for a moment, what someone thinks of me will catch my eye and then it goes away within seconds and I forget about it. But a lot of people really dwell on what other people think of them. And especially with social media and this whole construct of showing off what you're doing and comparing to the next person. When's the last time that you can really remember affecting your life that you were being influenced by what others thought of you? Is it a long, long time ago?
It's a long, long time ago, but I'll tell you, it doesn't mean that. I mean, even on Twitter, someone makes a comment and I might immediately come back at them and correct them. And I've been times where it's been a little more than a correction.
When you do that, you don't hold on to it. You let go of it, I'm sure. Like you probably don't remember it the next day or the next 10 minutes, probably.
No, no, not at all. I don't remember it. I don't remember anything negative very long because I have a natural, my mind works in a natural way to constantly focus on catching myself doing things right and positive, and I just sort of delete that. It's like a delete button. So I delete it and would have to be reminded. I deal with it at the moment, and I do the same things. For instance, if I were to have, let's just say in a competition, I have a blow up. Look, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to go and cry and kick and scream and get angry, but I give myself a very short time just to grieve and to let the steam off. But then, boom, it's back to work. It's back to moving forward with process and learning from it and saying, okay, what just happened? What can I learn from that? Why did that happen? How can I get it better this time? And how could I take what just happened and turn that into a positive and look at it just as information? But we're human beings, of course. We get emotional and somebody says something hurtful. It affects us, but it's the difference between having an initial impact and having it something where it changes your life because you dwell on it and you think that's you or you take it personally where it starts becoming part of your identity.
What do people come at you about? You mentioned, for example, a Twitter troll hitting you up on something, but with your content, when I go through your content is inspirational. Your content is self-improvement, motivational. Do people come at you for this particular content and want to like find some weak chink in the armor? Do people actually do that?
Well, I have to say, surprisingly, out of all the people and that follow me on social media, that it's so few that I'm actually surprised. I would think it would be more because when you're successful, there's always people that they want to find the chink in the armor. That's par for the course. But I've been fortunate that the people that correspond with me on a daily basis are just incredible. I mean, some of the most beautiful people. Even when I do my seminars, every year after my seminar, I say, oh my God, I'm never doing this again. And then I meet everybody and we hug and then I leave and I go, how can I not do this? I mean, it's so rewarding and so many people I touched and they touched me. It's just amazing. But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised how people sometimes interpret things. But I'll tell you something. It just happened just the other day. You're an intelligent guy. Maybe you can comment on this. Sometimes I have people that are critical and say that because I'm successful, that I shouldn't be charging for seminars or I shouldn't be promoting my books and things. If I was a real guy and was really successful trader, I wouldn't have to sell anything. I mean, just recently I said, well, Bill Gates doesn't have to sell Windows and Steve Jobs didn't have to sell iPhones and iPads and things, so I don't really quite understand that. But every now and then I get somebody says something like that. I think that's a little off the wall myself.
I look at it like this way. You're kind of like, and maybe I can think of myself like this too, and I'm not being cocky, but you're kind of like a mini version of Harvard without all the bureaucracy. You are an educator that is giving your perspective gleaned from years and years and years of experience. You're also a man of commerce. I am too. When you take those kinds of things and blend them together, there are some people that cannot stand the notion that commerce exists. They don't like it. And if an enterprising young person, let's don't talk about me or you. Let's say an enterprising young person. Let's say 20-year-old guy. He doesn't really know much about a particular subject, but he spends 5 years and becomes this coding expert. And he knows these techniques for learning this coding that are just fabulous. And he says to himself, after he's made some money on perhaps a startup or something, and he wants to share that information. I think there's a mental defect that causes somebody to want to criticize that 25-year-old guy with all that experience who wants to share his coding insights for commerce, for capitalism reasons. What is wrong with that? There is a significant number of people that just deep in their bones, they don't like it. I have my theories as to why they don't like it. I think it comes down to petty jealousy often. But it is what it is, right?
Well, I think it's somewhat presumptuous too, because who's to say that I don't take all that money from quote unquote my commerce life and donate it to charity? I mean, no one knows what I personally do with that money, first of all. But on top of that, see, I want my doctor to get paid really well. I want my pilot to be paid really well. I want my lawyer to be paid really well. I want them to have incentive to be great. I believe in capitalism. I believe in free markets. I believe in incentives. I want these people to be paid well, and I want them to have incentive.
You make a great point with incentive. And look, Warren Buffett's a great example. Why do people give their money to Warren Buffett? Because they're going to get something back. They're going to get something back in return. He is incentivized to give more and more of his effort in this capitalistic system, and then people give him more. It's the same with you. It's the same with me. It's the same with the 20-year-old tech guy that I made up. It's the same point. It is very true, though, that a lot of people just, I don't know, where their thinking either was it started wrong with the parents or they didn't get the right education in school. Something went wrong, right?
Yeah, I don't know, but I know one thing. No one has lasting success if they're not creating value. Maybe they have short-term success, lasting success, long-term success, around for a long time, consistent. Nobody has that unless they're creating value. It just doesn't work that way.
Mark, where am I reaching you today, by the way? What secret bunker are you in somewhere in the United States?
Yeah, I'm in the deep south right now.
Mindsets for winning, how to bring personal power to everything you do. I appreciate the effort. I am looking at myself, not by no means a copy of what you're doing here, but I think there's been a lot of things in my life that I want to put to paper that have nothing to do with the trading world, but you inspire me with what you've done here because I want to at some stage give my take on this, but you've done a really nice job and I think people will enjoy this.
Well, I appreciate it. And just want to say every time I've done an interview with you, and I do a lot of interviews, but I feel like it's an interview, like it's an Oprah type interview because you're so good. I always watch Oprah and I go, wow, she's so good. She's just such a great interviewer. And I feel that way with you. It's always fun and so easy and just all this stuff comes out and I go, wow, that's really good. That was great what we just talked about. It's you pull it out. So great job.
Well, thank you. I feel bad, though. Like sometimes I've been doing this recently, starting these conversations off and just start casually talking. You're like the fifth person in the last 10 interviews who's like, is this rolling? Are we, it's kind of like, I need to start telling people that the conversation has started.
No, you don't. Let me just tell you one very quick story. When I was in the music business, I had recording studios. I don't know if some of people know that I was a drummer for years, and I had recording studios. I was a producer. When we get someone in the vocal booth, I would say to them, hey, we're just going to set settings here. We're going to have a few passes. So I want to hear you do the track. Just sing it. We're not recording, though. Guess which one 9 out of 10 times was the track that we used, the one that they thought they weren't rolling because they were nice and relaxed and everything went smooth. And then you play them back. You say, which track do you like? And they go, this one. Oh, that's the one that you thought you were just practicing. So I think you should maybe continue that.
A side tangent as you go off on the music. I think it's interesting to look at music because if you look at, for example, the decade of the 1970s, so much music often had an authentic feel, or songs that became famous had something unique or a piece of dialogue that existed inside the song. Then we move into the 80s, 90s, and today things get so produced and so overproduced. I think you make a great point, is that sometimes when you're not thinking that you're on, you give your best effort.
Yeah, you let that subconscious take over and your natural creative beauty come out that you're blocking with your conscious mind because about worrying that you're going to be inferior and afraid you're going to be ridiculed or laughed at. And that's the whole idea. That's the whole idea, is to let the subconscious. Of course, you got to be good. You're not going to go into that vocal booth and if you can't sing, but you already build that talent. Now you got to let it shine. You got to let it shine. And then a lot of people have talent and they can't take it to that level because they just can't let it shine. They can't let go. Again, that's what this whole book's about.
I'll end it with one more side tangent on this musical side for people if they want to see something about being kind of this authentic and just going with it. There are some fantastic live performances of the Eagles singing Hotel California on YouTube. And you just say to yourself, how do they pull that off? You're like, wow, you're just in awe that they could be such in the moment and be so good live. It's not a carbon copy of the album, but in some ways it's better than the album. It's just amazing to watch people when they get into that zone.
Yeah. Well, there's a reason legends are legends.
The book, Mindset Secrets for Winning, How to Bring Personal Power to Everything You Do. Mark, where can we send people?
I guess Amazon, because I don't even have a website for this book, believe it or not.
You're on Twitter. You mentioned that. You've got a personal website. I guess your last name, Minervini. That's probably the best place to send people?
That's basically from my stock services. This is a big deviation from what I'm known for in the financial trading markets. But this is, I think, the most important piece of the puzzle. That's why I did it, because I actually think this is the most important piece of the puzzle that ties it all together, because where the mind goes, everything else follows. Yeah, just minervini.com. And, of course, you can get the book on Amazon.
I just want to say one last thing. Blasphemy. You say this is the most important piece of the puzzle. Somebody out there right now is thinking, no, I just want to know when to enter and when to exit. What are you talking about, Mark?
Yeah, well, that takes pulling the trigger. You can maybe do that, but how about when you do that and you build your account and then you got to do it with $1 million position and it moves against you and it's a little bit more pressure. And then now you got to have the mind to be able to deal with that. To grow your account, and you're going to have to eventually trade much larger. And that's one of the problems. I know we're going on to stocks now, but that's one of the problems that we see, is that someone starts off small. It could be in anything from Little League Baseball to the major leagues, or whatever, however you want to, whatever metaphor or thing you want to compare it to. But then you get to the big leagues and all of a sudden you're not making those same decisions because, again, you ignored the most important part of the puzzle, and that's your mind.
I agree 100%. Thank you, sir, for coming on. Hopefully we can do it again in the future when the next book comes, because there's always another one.
True, true. Just real quick, back, you mentioned the book earlier and you said Mindset for Winning. You said it later, you said it fine, but just want to let you know that you did not pronounce it correctly in the middle of the, like maybe 2/3 through.
Mindset Secrets for Winning.
Yeah, you said Mindset for Winning back the first time you mentioned it, but then the last time you said it fine over here. But I just wanted to let you know.
People need to know this is why Mark is successful, because he notes the details. You have to note the details. You can't go through life not paying attention to the details. So if you get in on an interview with this guy Covel and he mispronounces your book, you have to be comfortable to correct him at the end. And so hopefully Covel won't go cry that he got embarrassed on his podcast for saying the dang book cover wrong.
I'm okay with it. I'm just looking out for you.
Mark, I appreciate you coming on again.
I know you're a perfectionist. I know you like things done right.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Hey, take care, man. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Quite lucky today to have a really interesting guest, the author of the new international bestseller, the man who solved the market, how Jim Simons launched the quant revolution. My guest today, Gregory Zuckerman, longtime Wall Street Journal reporter, decades at it, quite the investigative guy, knows how to get behind the scenes and tell a great story. So Jim Simons, I think Greg has put to bed any thought that there might be a better trader in the history of the planet than Simons. The guy just mints money at his company, Renaissance Technologies. The book is great. I highly recommend it. Today, I take Greg across Mr. Simons' world and try to get to some of those insights that we can all use, we can all learn from, perhaps. You know, this is one of the smartest guys ever. I mean, just a brilliant mathematician. I mean, that was before he even got to investing. Then he got to investing, and he's dominated like that, like none other. Without any further delay, without any further rambling from me, let's jump right into my interview with Gregory Zuckerman. Listen, back in the day, I think somewhere, and I'm not asking you to recollect, but I think we might have exchanged emails 15 years ago or something, because I think you're a guy that has been in kind of this following these outsider quant traders for a long time. I mean, you know all the names, you know all the players.
I do. I've been following this for a long time. I'm focused very much on the buy side, be it hedge funds, once in a while, Bill Gross, and mutual funds if something interesting, or Jeff Gunlack. But yeah, I'm very buy side oriented. When quant trading is interesting, I'll focus on that. When long short stuff is blowing up, then I'll move to that. But I'm a buy side guy, so yeah, we could have.
Here's where I want to jump in with you, because I think, at least for me, for someone who's written quant books and looked at performance tables, I immediately, in your book, and hopefully I'll be the first person to start with this lovely topic on all the interviews that you're going to be doing. Oh, by the way, congratulations, book in the top 50 of all books for sale on Amazon at this moment. So that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah, so far the reaction's been really strong. A little bit surprising, frankly, but it's been great.
So I'm on page 331 and 332, and there's a performance table on there that I've never seen before. That might not mean anything, but I know a few people here and there, and no one's ever shared it with me. And I would love for you to tell me about that performance table. Was it just something that came along in the natural process? Had you seen it earlier? Because that's a really interesting table. Management fee, performance fee, return, before fees, size of the fund, medallion, trading profits. It's an amazing 2 pages.
Yeah, like much in the book, it looks like it came together easily and quickly, but it was a lot of late nights and frustrated days.
Who did you cajole for those 2 pages?
It was many people. It was cobbling together information, data, annual reports, early annual reports. Some of it was official stuff that they used to share with investors when they had outside investors. That was the easier, I mean, not easy, but it was easier to get that kind of information. Early on, they had some outside LPs. If you track down some of the old timers that are still around, and that was another challenge of the book, that not everyone who's in the know is really around anymore. Even during the course of my reporting, some passed away. We're talking the 70s and 80s are important periods of Jim Simons' life. The earlier periods of Medallion's history, there were some people alive who still had some annual reports. Then you have to encourage them, cajole them to share them with you. Some were more eager to share than others. The more recent stuff, I had to develop sources within the firm. That was even harder. This is the hardest project I ever did in my life, hardest piece of work I ever did in my life. I'm glad to put it all together because, like you said, I had never seen it all on 1 page or 2 pages, as it were. I wanted to see it myself.
Let me take you to the question that then really starts to intrigue me. In my world, looking at a lot of these, quote, trend following guys, I've always found the month by month tables fascinating. You can see so much. For example, if you look at October of 2008, you see all this trend following performance that was straight up. That's so interesting. Did you have a chance to see the month by month?
I saw some of the month by months, not enough to include in the book, not for the entirety of it. I did get people on the inside and outside who invested in Medallion who described the month by month. And like you said, when I talk to people about the performance, almost everybody focuses on the returns, 66% a year, 39% after fees. They are remarkable, but internally and to sophisticated investors like yourself, just as impressive, or maybe even more so, is the Sharpe ratio, which they've gotten up to 7.5 at this point, and the fact that monthly returns are pretty steady. Almost always, they've had a few down months. They have, but not many. And that's as impressive as the outright returns, the numbers.
Is there anything else like this? I mean, behind the scenes, is there some Jim Simons that's even more publicity shy than Jim Simons?
I don't think so. I think there are some that are even more secretive. There's a group out in Princeton that reportedly has amazing returns. I don't think they're as good as Medallion. I don't think they're as big as Medallion. Medallion at this point is $10 billion in size, and they leverage that up, obviously. It's not just the returns and not just the Sharpe ratio, but the size at this point is pretty substantial. Earlier on, they capped it at smaller numbers, 5 billion, and then even earlier periods much lower. They give back all the profits each year and they start over again with about $10 billion. There are others who've had ridiculous returns, but they're generally smaller. I haven't been able to substantiate anything like this. There could be something somewhat similar. I hear rumors about smaller groups and yet still substantial, but not as big as Medallion.
You know what's really interesting here, too, staying on these 2 pages of performance and size of fund, is even though 10 billion is substantial, these days, when you look at groups like Bridgewater, AQR, I mean, this 10 billion looks small. So clearly, just philosophically from the top, they're running a very different shop in the sense that they obviously don't want to have 200 billion under management.
Yes, they've made a conscious decision, and I write about it in the book. It really contrasts with others, like you said, with Bridgewater, with AQR. AQR is a quant shop, and the returns been good over the years, nothing remarkable. People criticize them a lot as being a marketing shop more than a performance shop, probably a little overdone, that criticism, but they are a monster in terms of AUM. You can make it a broader statement. So I wrote an earlier book called The Greatest Trade Ever about John Paulson and those who anticipated the financial meltdown and did really well. And Paulson made $20 billion over 2 years, but then he made that same classic mistake by getting too big. His AUM, I think, got up 30, maybe even $40 billion. And then the resulting period was really poor. He's underperformed. Jim Simons and Medallion made a decision. They'd rather have performance than AUM. They'd rather focus on the incentive fee than the management fee. They could be managing a lot more. Now they have some outside funds. So they overall do manage about $68 billion. But the key fund is the Medallion Fund, and they won't let people in. And they've actually offended early investors, even people close to Jim, friends and others, who once were investors in Medallion and were pushed out. They made a conscious decision. We want performance to be strong. We don't think we can do it above a certain level. Today, it's $10 billion. We're going to kick people out, and we don't even care about the management fees.
I'm going to take you back in time in a few minutes to get at the nexus of the book, your starting point. But I want to stay here for a second because as we talk about this great performance, the obvious follow-up question that everyone wants to know, and since you are the author of this fine international bestseller right now, everyone wants to know, Greg, what does Jim do to make all this money?
Jim Simons developed a different way to invest or trade or speculate, however one puts it. There are always those who were doing technical analysis. This is a cousin of that, but it's on a much, much more sophisticated level. There are always people using traditional methods, such as the Peter Lynch approach. Know what you invest in. Your wife comes home with a nice pair of pantyhose. Hey, honey, those are new. Where did you buy them? I'm going to buy Legs, the company. And he made a lot of money. There were always those like George Soros and Stanley Druckenmiller sitting back, looking at global trends, economic outlook, estimated interest rates, et cetera, make big bets. Jim Simons was the pioneer, not the only one. He was a pioneer in a very different approach. That's using mathematics, developing predictive algorithms. This is way, way, way before Mark Zuckerberg and Silicon Valley embraced that approach, and developing an automated trading system. Early on, they couldn't put on the trades within their system, but their automated system told them what to buy and what to sell. It's all about looking for patterns and looking for short-term patterns.
What's the definition of short term? Are we talking light speed, a day, or is it all kinds of short term time periods?
From my reporting, I've determined that the average holding period is about 2 days. Some people confuse them with high frequency fast traders. They're not that. They've tried that. They haven't really succeeded with that. They kind of don't think that's their niche. That's not their focus. They don't get in and get out in a millisecond ahead of you and I. They try to look for short-term patterns, be it moments to months, is the way they describe it. It could be a few days, it could be a few hours, but it's not a second or under a second. They're not about building their computers to that point. And frankly, they've got very, very powerful software and technology and computers, needless to say, hardware, but it's not as powerful as some others. And they kind of poke fun at themselves to some extent. It's short-term patterns that you and I aren't aware of, and they repeat, and their thesis is that human behavior repeats, and they take advantage of that. They do the best in periods of panic because human behavior seems to repeat itself in those periods.
They trade everything. They started with futures and went to stocks, but in terms of markets, they're going to go from stocks, bonds, commodities, you name it, metals, ags, everything under the sun is going to be in their portfolio.
That's exactly true. So until about 1994, they were only making money in commodities, in currencies, and in bond futures. And they were about $800 million of size at the time. People internally said, hey, we're doing fine, Jim. Let's keep it going. No reason to try to expand into equities, which really was the area that was frustrating them. They could not figure out stocks. And there were a lot of frustrations along the way in the whole Jim Simons Renaissance story, which is kind of one of the surprises that I found. Jim said, no, I want to be bigger than $800 million of assets. I want to change the world kind of thing. I want to be the one to figure it out. And there was some disagreement within the firm about that. Jim is a guy, he's a fascinating guy because he's a mathematician. He can talk about that. He's a quant. He's an academic, but he's also a guy who loves money. He's not ashamed of that, and he wanted to get really wealthy, and the only way to do that is do it in equities because it's just a deeper market. You don't run up into ceilings and limits with things like soybeans and some small currencies, and that's what they were trading at the time. They finally figured out how to make money in equities, and they were off to the races. But if they hadn't, they really would have been another nice, successful hedge fund, but a narrow one.
Before I take you back to the start here, I want to take you back to the start of Jim. I can recall probably in the mid-1990s seeing these old Financial World magazines. They weren't old then, but current then. And you could see the top 100 players on Wall Street. And he started to sneak into these lists. There wasn't any other information on him, especially when the internet started to kick in. You couldn't find anything. Roll forward about a decade, sometime around 2005. I'm in an office with a fund manager who today has a net worth exceeding $1 billion. And we were talking about these kinds of topics. And he looked at me and he said, what about Jim Simons? What does he do? And I'm like, how the hell do I know? You're the one that's made the bloody fortune. So it's really interesting where you're going today. I can see why, if so many preeminent competitors have been curious about him, and then that trickles down to the Twitter world. I mean, all of a sudden you've got the entire world like really curious. What's the backstory? Let's take it to the backstory, because Jim is a guy, I want you to start this. I'm going to kind of give you a lead in, but I mean, he's basically famous for math formulas that most of us mere mortals can't begin to comprehend or understand. That's before he ever got into trading.
That's exactly right. And it's my view that even if he had never started any trading, he'd still be worthy of a book. He lived a full life even before he changed Wall Street. I'll explain. He grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, middle-class guy. Father was an executive in a shoe manufacturing factory. He always loved math. He had a passion for math. He kind of learned from his father to follow his passion because his father didn't. His father had a thriving career in the motion picture business. Family obligations arose, and he felt compelled to go work for the family business, the factory business, and he wasn't happy. And Jim Simons noted that and said, you know what, I'm going to try to follow my passions. And they were mathematics. And he did well at MIT, got a PhD at Berkeley, began teaching. He taught. He was a popular teacher at Harvard and at MIT. But he always, as I suggested earlier, also had a passion for money along with mathematics. He got involved with this business. He helps start a business in South America. He needed money. He had some debts at that point, and he needed to find a way to make some more money. So he got an offer to go work for an organization called the IDA, which helps the NSA in the United States. And basically, it's not an arm of the government, but they help the government. He was code breaking. He was fighting the Russians, the USSR, in the Cold War.
1970s, right?
Exactly. I was about to say 1970s. Yeah. He was very successful as a code breaker. He learned how to build algorithms there. He also learned that he wasn't very good as a programmer. That lasted for a while. And he doesn't consider himself a very good programmer, but he knows how to hire them. But he also learned how to interact with some of the smartest people on the planet and how to recruit them to some extent, or he watched how they were recruited. And he subsequently went to Stony Brook University in the United States, in New York. It wasn't a really good school at the time, wasn't a good math department. He took it on to build it, and he did that. And again, he also honed those skills and recruiting skills. And in some ways, my book, The Man Who Solved the Market, obviously it's an investing book, but it's also a management book, I think, because you can learn from Simons as much there. He's got a remarkable ability to find talent, to recruit talent. Got a few tricks up his sleeve, getting people to leave their careers to join him. But he also is remarkable in how he gets people to work together. We could talk about that later. But basically, here he was in 1978. He had conquered all these different worlds, mathematics. Along the way, he got impressive awards. He was really the top of the field. He's one of the most important geometers of the past century. His work has really impacted all kinds of different areas in physics, others that you wouldn't have necessarily expected. Then he was, like I said, developed this department at Stony Brook. But he also got a little frustrated with mathematics, and he likes trading. So he didn't really do much of it. He had dabbled here and there with his wedding money and other kind of money, gave up on it. But something about it really spoke to him. He likes that thrill we get when you make a good pick and it goes up. He liked that. He really enjoyed it, even though the people around him were like, why are you wasting your time trading? Or he didn't even know he was trading. These were mathematicians who really didn't trade on their own. He set out, and currencies were becoming unshackled at the time. Prices were moving in currencies. And he said, you know what? I'm going to try to figure out and trade currencies. And he started in 1978. But it took many, many years for him to figure it out. So he really kind of gave up on his early career. He was an acclaimed mathematician, and he gave up a lot to try to make it in trading. And he found himself in this little strip mall in Long Island, spotty phone service, no one willing to work with him, unable to figure it out. And it took him a while.
So he started his firm officially trading the late 70s, and his first big year was not till the late 80s or first year, 1990. Lay that scenario out.
Yeah, so 1978, he started trading. He recruited Lenny Baum Welch. He's famous for that algorithm. If any of your listeners are aware, he's a pretty well-known mathematician in his own right. And again, Simons is really great at recruiting and bringing them on board, getting people to work with him, even if people have no interest, and these people didn't have any interest in trading. Lenny Baum, like many others who Jim Simons recruited, really had no interest in investing, which is kind of ironic because they're the ones who conquered the investing world. He started in 1978. They had a lot of ups and downs, and it wasn't clear what approach they should take. For early on, they tried modeling the market. It didn't really work. He brought on another mathematician named James Axe, who's also well known in his own right. Eventually, Simons and Lenny Baum shifted to sort of traditional macro kind of investing, where they would look at the news, try to anticipate the news, hire economists. They had this guy, not a well-known economist at the time, named Alan Greenspan, who they had consulted with. And they tried to trade like most others. And there were a lot of winning days and there were a lot of losing days. They made a lot. They lost a lot. The ups and downs really just left him sick to his stomach, literally, Jim Simons. And he said, I've got to find a different way. I got to find a better way. Got to find a way where the model works on its own and the system works on its own. And he believed there's some structure beneath the market that people aren't aware of, some way to pick up these patterns that were repeating. And he was convinced that he could be the one to do that. But again, like you said, it took years of back and forth.
That notion of structure, how close did you get as a guy who's been around interviewing, investigating, doing a lot of homework behind the scenes for a long time? How close did you get to really wrapping your arms around that structure, do you think?
I got a better sense for the fact that there's more order than we imagine in the markets. It's not as random. I became more convinced of that there are repeating patterns, and that's what these guys and some women do all day long. They find that. but there isn't any like one secret. I went into the project thinking, okay, Greg, I bet you a Wednesday at 11:48 each week, I don't know, commodity prices, these commodities always go up. It's not like that. Their system, they don't trade like most others. It's all about relationship. People, when I go on these shows and stuff, CNBC, whatever, what does he think about Google, Greg? No, they don't do that.
You knew I was not going to give that to you today, right?
Yeah,
Come on.
no, that I do, yes. That I knew. But the average person is kind of, they'll still do it. They'll ask him at these events, once in a blue moon when he'll do like a scientific event and they get some average person there. Or when you see even a quant, forget about Jim Simons, when you see a quant interviewed on TV.
David Harding comes on CNBC and they ask him what's going to happen next, that kind of thing.
Yeah, you roll your eyes. I'm not saying I came into it thinking there'd be anything like that, but I thought there'd be something a little bit closer to that. And that's not how they invest. What they do is they hold about 4,000 or 5,000 stocks long, about 4,000 or 5,000 stocks short. They make their money on the relationships among different individual stocks and other investments as well, meaning a group of stocks versus an index, a group of stocks versus a factor, a group of stocks versus a different group of stocks. It's almost an engineering and a technology achievement on their part, and they put together this sophisticated system to put all these different factors and other elements together into a system. What I came away with, and you asked me what I came away with, is just the understanding that there are many more factors, to use the terminology, affecting markets than you and I are aware of. We all focus on things like, I don't know, earnings, revenue, and then you get more sophisticated from there. It's my belief that there are many more, and there's some that just work for a little bit of the time, some of the day, etc. Simons and his group are aware of more of them, but it's also important to remember that they don't get it right. Yeah, they're the greatest investment team ever. They're up 66% a year since 1988, but they're somewhat humble. I don't want to go overboard, but they're somewhat humble because they get it right barely more than 50% of the time. The point is that they're somewhat akin to a casino where they'll trade a lot. If you trade a lot and you get it right a bit more than 50% of the time, you make a lot of money. It's not like they are superhuman and they get every trade right.
I caught a clip the other day from my buddy Barry Ritholtz talking to Eugene Fama. On top of that, you just mentioned the random walk. How does a guy like Fama, you mentioned the random walk, and then on the other side of the equation, we have Jim Simons. What are us folks out in the audience supposed to take from that? Because Eugene Fama got a Nobel Prize for, I don't want to reduce his work to just saying it kind of says that a Jim Simons should not exist, but isn't that kind of what he says?
Yeah, I guess he would argue that Jim Simons is that monkey writing Shakespeare.
Hold on. Let me get to that performance chart again. How many billions did Simons make?
You put enough monkeys into a room, you will get one writing Shakespeare by definition. I agree with you. And if you talk to Simons about it.
Does he believe that too?
No, he does not. I've talked to him about it. He believes that there are inefficiencies in the market. There aren't many of them. I really don't want people to come away from the book saying, and some people have kind of suggested as much to me, well, maybe I can be like Jim Simons. I could build something like, no, do not try this at home. You can do a variation. You could try to do it on a small scale. You can be inspired by him. You can learn lots and lots of lessons, both individual investors and sophisticated ones. But to say that you could create something like this, he may be that monkey. And I don't mean it in a random way. I mean, there are
so much more brilliant, and such an interesting combination of assets and people that he's brought together with resources that the average person just is never going to have access to.
I think that's right. So people nowadays, now we're jumping around a little bit, but people on Wall Street, financial industry, they say, oh, I've got PhDs working for me. I've hired PhDs. What they do at Renaissance, they're not just PhDs. It's easy to forget or not to understand that these are the people, these are the tops of their fields. They could be at the tops of different departments, and they were at different scientific departments around the country. You take like a David Donahue from Stanford. These are just award-winning top PhDs. They're not just PhDs. They're people, again, in physics, in astronomy. They love to hire astronomers. The tops of their fields. They're not just hiring smart people. Everyone's smart out there. They're competing with smart people. These people have just done award-winning stuff, and he'll somehow get, and I can explain a little bit how, but he will recruit these people who have no interest in investing. They're award winners and they see superstars in different fields. They'll target them. I don't think the David Hardings and the other competitors and the Cliff Asmuses are able to attract this talent internally within Renaissance. They worry about talent and fighting for talent, but they worry about it versus a Google or a Facebook, not a Two Sigma.
As I look at this performance table still, and I see this consistency, you're describing to me an ongoing desire and ability to bring in top talent. But I see this consistency, 2000, 98%, 2001, 33%. That's not consistent return necessarily, but it's consistently positive. And you seem to be describing month by month that's consistently positive. My thought becomes, what are all the new people for? I mean, if Jim has discovered the structure, is it a structure that is changing in a way so much that all this brain power is required? Because, I mean, this has been going on for a long time. This return stream is not new. So how much of this is core precepts that they put together with some of the original team? And is any potential new hires with the great pedigrees, is some of that to throw all of us off to think that all of that is needed?
Here's the answer. The original precepts are still very important, and I write about them in the book. There are principles that they've established. Some of it is breaking the day into bars that others kind of followed and copied afterwards or developed on their own, but still work for them. But it's a constant battle. It's hard to explain, but despite these returns, I know they look like they figured it out. They don't feel that way. The market is changing and they're aware of that. So I've talked to them about ETFs and the shift to passive. So a lot of what they do is they take advantage of the mistakes that we all make, that the average investor makes. I've said to them, what happens when there are no more dentists out there to take advantage of? There are fewer of them. As we all know, back in, 1999, you go to a barbecue, everyone's talking about pets.com and their shares going up, et cetera. You don't get that anymore. I don't know if people are going to talk about their investments as probably Bitcoin or something like that today. If the nature of the market is changing, and I think it is, active investors are shrinking and passives are rising. The behavior of the market seems to be changing. The behavior is also changing because of the man in the White House, the Twitter-based decisions. That's a constant battle for people internally.
But Jim's making money regardless of who's in the White House.
Yes, he hires these superstars and he says, go figure out how to keep up with this market, this ever-changing market. You wouldn't think it, but there's a real sense of urgency within the firm and pressure, and it doesn't feel like a university department. The talent is like a university department, but then when they get there, there's a feeling of a Wall Street firm and the pressure, and they work hard. It's a unique blend of the two. You're right. From the outside, we look at these returns, they're like they can phone it in from an island, and that's not how they feel. They feel it's a constant battle. They have to keep bringing in new talent. Like I said, they do have these outside funds, Reef and others that are available to institutions. They don't trade exactly like Medallion, but they are important to the firm too in terms of talent and hiring. And I talk about within the book, Jim was going through a personal challenge at the time. In some ways, I think he needed a distraction. That's why he started these funds. But now that they've gone, they wanted them to be successful. It's a weird thing. Like Jim Simons, the people within the firm are well established in academics and elsewhere. They join, they don't really need the money. They're not really out to get the money. Once they're there, I really do think they're hooked. And I write about it in the book. You don't want to let your colleagues down. There's some competition involved. You want to show that you're a star. You want to keep making the money once you get hooked to the money. For all those reasons, there is an urgency within the firm. And the markets, again, are always changing. They have to keep up.
Let me keep playing devil's advocate and pushing back. You start the book off really diving into, it's quite a challenge. I can really relate to where you had to go with this, but the secrecy element. I will let you just go down the path of kind of outlining some of the secrecy that you had to deal with, because this wasn't something where initially I don't think people were really saying, Greg, come on in and we're going to do a biography. Come on in. Everyone's going to talk to you. It wasn't like that. But when you're dealing with that much secrecy, is there a side of you, even though you're a cagey guy with lots of experience, is there a side of you where did you ever feel at a certain point in time and doing all your homework that people weren't being frank, or they were leading you the wrong direction, or there was disguises being thrown your way?
Yeah, you have to worry about that. It's a good point. These guys are cagey and they're secretive and they sign 30-page non-disclosures. Here they are talking to you. Why are they, you wonder? I was wary. That's why you have to check these things with others. But I do feel that good stories in life want to come out. People want to talk. They've just gone through this experience where they've worked at, or they currently work at, the greatest investing firm mankind or modern finance has seen. Kind of part of them wants to talk about it, wants to share this experience. They're going to go to their graves without sharing some of the insights or experiences and stories and drama within the firm. And part of it also is, and now we kind of get into sort of the strategy as a writer, they knew I wasn't going away. And I made that very, very clear.
They knew that you had enough, that you were going to go down a path, and that they were better off to make sure some of these things were accurate completely, at least, I'm guessing.
That's exactly right. I didn't say that overtly, but I over and over again left that impression that better that I write it than someone else. Someone was going to write the story, I said to them. Jim Simon's story, be it while he's alive or after he's gone, be it while you guys are alive or after you're gone, someone's going to write it. Better it be someone who cares about accuracy. And I do. I can't tell you how hard this project was. There were endless days where I was sending just short paragraphs that you wouldn't even notice as a reader, 4 paragraphs about mathematics back in the 70s and what Jim was working on, or something, some drama in the 80s at the firm. And I was sending it to people that are familiar with the information, and they'd say, and at first it frustrated me, irritated me. These are mostly mathematicians, and they'd say, I'd send them 4 paragraphs. Greg, this is awful. Greg, how can you write this? This is terrible. You got it all wrong. And then I'm taken aback. You know, I've been doing this for a couple decades. I didn't think I got it so wrong. And then we'd go through it. I don't know, 10% of it would be wrong. And that's kind of why I sent it to you guys, to go through it with me and tell me what's wrong. We all aren't thrilled with errors. They hate errors. Like this mathematicians, it's a whole different breed, I learned. Eventually, I stopped taking it personally. I kind of was amused. This is awful, Greg. This is terrible. Well, what do you like? What didn't you like? Look at that second line in the 4th paragraph. You cannot describe differential equations that way. Okay, how would you describe it? And they would describe it. And I'm grateful. They spent a lot of time going back and forth with me. So I think, like the outsiders, the people on the inside and people that used to work there didn't want this to be inaccurate. They figured, all right, Zuckerman's not going away. Zuckerman's going to write this thing. Let's at least help. We're not going to give him the secret sauce, but let's make sure he's accurate about what he's writing. And then, frankly, yeah, they're poker players, but sometimes the secret sauce slips out. There were times when people told me things and they regretted it. You can't tell personally who said what, but there were those cases. I believe I got enough. The readers will tell me if I got enough.
It's a great feeling as a writer, though, isn't it? You're in the middle of something, and then something slips out, and all of a sudden, all the pieces come together in your mind. You're like, yes, thank you.
Yeah, there were
a lot of that.
There were great moments in the process. There were awful moments. There were frustrating moments. There was a moment when Jim Simon's person says, Greg, Jim decided not to talk to you. I'm sorry. And that was it. I was like, how do I really write this book about Jim Simons if he's not going to talk to me? It's about his firm. It's not a biography. It's a lot of biographical stuff in there. It's really about how this group of colorful characters figured out the market. So there were awful moments. And as you suggest, at the beginning of the book, Nick Patterson, who played a really interesting, important role early in the firm, he said, Greg, no one is going to talk to you. And I remember sitting at that moment, across from him in a restaurant in Cambridge, Massachusetts, saying to myself, how the heck am I going to write this book? He's right. Nick is right. They've got zero incentive. These guys got rich by working there. No one wants to piss off Jim Simons. So why will people talk to me, and what am I going to do? So there were a lot of ups and downs, a lot of drama behind the scenes, and hopefully it was worth it for the reader.
So I'm curious, how many hours did Jim give you? Is there anything you might like to share in terms of personality or manner, or just something inspiring that he gives off that other people could take away as a distant lesson from a guy that's as accomplished as he is?
He spent over 10 hours with me in his office talking about not Renaissance per se, but his early life, his more recent years, which are interesting in their own right. We talked about mathematics. We talked about life, approaches, things like that. I have to say, I'm a cynical journalist. I look for flaws to some extent. he's got them like we all do, but he's a pretty impressive individual. I really think he's one of the more remarkable just individuals, personalities of the past 100 years. Again, his accomplishments in mathematics and code breaking, recently in philanthropy. He's a good guy. He's very unique because he can do the math, needless to say, and he's a quant, but he's also, you could have a beer with him. He's a funny guy. Some of the humor I think comes through in the book. I hope it does.
You mentioned his math. Not you mentioned his math, obviously his math, but I was thinking of his father. You mentioned his background and did not lead with a father with a high math background or anything like that. But does Jim attribute his math ability? How does he view it? Does he view it as just purely hard work? How does he see himself? Because again, he's got math that us mere mortals, we're just not going to comprehend in our lifetime. So how does he see that he made his way through at least the topic of math?
I don't know if I have a good answer. He developed this early love for the subject, for the topic. He was encouraged by his parents to pursue it. They were bright people. They weren't math oriented, though. I don't know. It's a good question where his passion and his abilities came from, were they inherent? Did he work? Listen, I know he considers himself to be not the fastest mathematician. And he went to these top schools. He dealt with the top guys. There are people that are faster and quicker, he says. He's just very good. I'll talk about it a little bit in the book. He is really good at mulling a problem and sticking with it and being persistent. And you see that in the firm as well. There were ups and downs and they stuck with it. So he has an ability that maybe others don't. He chews on a problem for years sometimes in mathematics. That's one of his gifts and competitive advantages, I would argue. He comes at things also a little bit differently. He's got a different approach to mathematics than some in the field. And once again, that's similar in the world of investing too. I mean, it's ironic. There's a real paradox at the heart of my book that it was a guy in a group of people who didn't really know much about investing who conquered investing. And to some extent, I'm not saying he's an outsider when it comes to mathematics, but he does take different approaches to solving problems, and that's all helped him.
As we wind down, I got a couple more topics I want to run you through. If I take you back to the summer of 1998, for those that were alive enough to remember, it was a pretty crazy time. It was another one of these times where they said, if you don't trust the men behind the curtains, the government officials and the big banks, the world is about to go to hell in a handbasket because this hedge fund somewhere up in Connecticut basically blew up the world. And we're talking about long-term capital management. How did that affect you? Because that would have been a peer of his at the time. Probably much more money under management at the time would have been for LTCM, I'm guessing.
Yeah, LTCM was bigger, especially with the leverage. They were, I wouldn't call them quants, but they had a lot of similarities what Simons and Renaissance were doing because they hired academics and they hired often mathematicians, sometimes scientists. They hired from Wall Street, which is different from, in addition to the mathematics. So that was different from LTCM. Renaissance and Jim Simons don't hire individuals from Wall Street with any Wall Street backgrounds. But yeah, they were concerned. LTCM had models of their own and they didn't work. And so they learned lessons from that experience. One of them being, be humble, don't leverage up so much, don't be stubborn with your models. LTCM was a little bit stubborn. The Renaissance gang, and Jim Simons in particular, they do not override their models 98% of the time, 99% of the time. And that's one of their skills. That's one of their explanations for their success. But once in a while they do. And it's usually Simons over the protests of his colleagues. And I write about it in the book, where in crises sometimes he will take risk off, even when the opportunities look great. So if you remember what happened with LTCM, because of what was happening in Russia, market was flipping out and LTCM stuck with its positions and moved into them a little bit more, added to them. And that's not what Renaissance does. Even when they see real great opportunity, they'll reduce risk in a period of crisis, and then they'll jump right back in when their models say to. They learned lessons from LTCM were the answer, I would say.
I have one last question to you, but before I get to that, how would you define their strategy in terms that the average person comprehends? Is this a form of arbitrage? Is it a short-term momentum, kind of a cross-sectional momentum? Was there ever any real definition given to the strategies or the structure that they have determined and the way they go about it is just different than everyone else?
Early on, I think, I don't know, until around 2000, maybe a little bit before, maybe after, you could actually see them as cousins of technical traders, technical analysis.
Using price movement.
Exactly. All about price as an input. And that's what they focused on, looking at patterns, looking for patterns in the market. So that's not unlike what technical traders do. And I give that analogy and I talk about the history of technical analysis just a little bit in the book because I think it's important. That's how people within the firm describe themselves. Maybe you and I would be a little bit surprised by that because I think the general view of technical trading is that it's really unsophisticated and people dismiss those individuals. But there are some really impressive traders on the street, Stanley Druckenmiller and others, who use technical analysis sometimes to confirm a thesis. You got to look at them as a much, much, much more sophisticated version of technical trading. That was early on, or that was till 2000 or so. And then they started collecting other kinds of data, everything from the stuff that we call today alternative data. They are a data machine. They just know Bob Mercer, who played a huge and still plays a huge role within the firm, controversial politically, but he talks about there's no data like more data. So they vacuum up. If there's a piece of data you can think of a possibility, they bought it before everybody else, and they've been analyzing it before everybody else. Now you can look at them as early machine learning because their models work on their own. They don't even know really why their stuff is doing what it's doing, their trade, the signals, why they bought it, why they made money, that kind of thing. They can figure it out, and they do figure it out. But now you can look at them as sort of an early version of machine learning.
By the way, as you just mentioned, Bob Mercer, so you can talk a little bit about him, but I think it's interesting, this very prominent individual inside Renaissance basically helped to support Trump to get Trump elected. And Jim Simons was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton's. Such an interesting thing that inside the firm, you could have such a diametrically opposed political views inside the same shop, playing at the presidential politics level. It's amazing, huh?
There are all kinds of lessons, I think, from the Renaissance story. There's the investing, obviously, lessons, management lessons. There's also just lessons to how to work with each other. In this day and age, especially in the United States, when everybody's at each other's throats, you have Jim Simons, a left-leaning guy. I think he was the third largest financial supporter of Hillary Clinton in 2016, working with the co-CEO at the time, Bob Mercer, who may be the most important reason why Donald Trump's in the office, because Bob Mercer and his daughter Rebecca Mercer helped put Kellyanne Conway and, more importantly, Steve Bannon in the campaign. They settled it. They turned the tide for Donald Trump. Bob Mercer is a very right-wing guy. The firm is a mix. They got libertarians. They got all kinds of individuals. Now, what Bob Mercer was doing did eventually hurt morale within the firm, and I describe the scene where Simons had to come to Mercer and tell him he's got to step down as co-CEO. But they did work together for a long time, and despite the political disagreements, they're fascinating just characters within the firm and people who have worked there. That's the one thing that I was just overjoyed with, that they're not just kind of boring mathematicians. There's passion within the story, the Renaissance story. There's intrigue. There's all kinds of twists and turns that I hadn't expected.
My last one for you, Greg. Typically, this is the kind of question you would start an interview with, but what the heck was the trigger for you exactly? When was the trigger? What was D-Day that said, I'm going this direction?
2 decades ago. Who doesn't want to write about Jim Simons? I've been thinking about it in the back of my mind. I reached out to them at one point to work with him. This is years ago. I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe longer. It's about 10 decade probably. And they were like, yeah, no, Greg, no, sorry. He's not working with you. He's not working with anybody. No. And we'll let you know if he ever decides to write a book. I've always kind of wanted to. And I remember being at a dinner and there was a quant guy there. And I was thinking to myself, I don't even think we were talking about quant stuff, but I remember looking at him and thinking, geez, that's the one story that hasn't been told on Wall Street. Wouldn't it be great if I could be the one to tell it? So then I started working on it. I got a book contract. I didn't cash the book contract. God knows I could have used the money.
When did you start the project with the publisher?
Late 2016, maybe early 2017. And then for 4 months, I'm sitting at my desk right now in my basement in New Jersey, and I had this check on my desk, and I wasn't going to cash it because I wanted the ability to give it back to the publisher. And I knew if I cashed it, I'd start spending it. I wasn't sure if I could do this project. And again, if I cashed it and then decided not to do it, it'd be a mess. I just didn't want it. And eventually the accounting department, Penguin Random House's accounting department, had this discrepancy. They wrote, what author doesn't cash in advance? It's not a lucrative business we're in. We could use the money. I got a kid in college. I was being stubborn. I wanted the ability to give it back. So I spent like 4 or 5 months working on the book without knowing if I could do it or not. And then I went out to California. I met with Elwyn Burlekamp and I met with Sandor Strauss. They worked with Jim early on at the firm. They were really fascinating individuals, but B, they were just interesting and colorful, and they had drama in their lives. And I said to myself, you know what? The early part of this firm, I think I can write about. It's just an interesting, fascinating group of people. They described other people Jim Axe, who had died. And I said to myself, okay, I think I can do the early part of this period, even if Simons doesn't talk to me. And then I'm going to make this giant leap. I really felt, and talked to my wife, I just still was never 100% sure I could do this thing. But I made a bet that I could fill in the gaps. I could do post 1990. Up to 1990, in his early life, I thought I could find enough academics, mathematicians, people who worked with him, even if Simons didn't talk to me. But thankfully, he did talk to me. And thankfully, I was able to get people within the firm. That was my fear. How the heck am I going to get people who actually work there right now to talk to me? But you try hard enough, and this was the hardest thing I ever did. And if you knew the hours I put into this thing and how much I'm getting paid per hour, yeah, it's not a pretty picture.
Well, now listen, not to toot my horn or anything like that, but I mean, back in the day, this is over 10 years ago, when I did this book on the turtles, on a smaller scale, I had these similar kinds of things where you're digging and you're digging and you're digging and there's no one talking to you. And then all of a sudden someone just says, oh, by the way, did you know this? Da, 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 da. And you're like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. And those kinds of feelings. So look, there's lots of people that have a podcast, but I do relate to so many things that you had to go through in this book. I think it's pretty damn awesome. Really, it's quite an achievement to go dig around in one of the most, perhaps the most secretive fund in the history of mankind, and to go dig around in there and to put a story together. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm still stunned. I finished. Forget about whether people buy the book or not. And I hope they do. And I hope they enjoy it. And I hope they stay in touch and give me constructive criticism and things they like, things they didn't. I love interacting with readers and listeners. But yeah, I'm still a little bit surprised that I actually finished it.
The book, The Man Who Solved the Market, how Jim Simons launched the quant revolution. Available everywhere. If they can't figure out where to get it, they don't deserve to buy it. Where can we send people? Is there a website or anything you want to direct them to reach out to you, give feedback, anything?
So I'm on Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me there. I think it's @GZuckerman. But I'm also at the Wall Street Journal. Feel free to email me privately, gregory.zuckerman@wsj.com. I love interacting with people. I get good story ideas, next book idea. Some of my best sources on Wall Street are people that ripped into me. You don't have to rip into me, people, but feel free to send me constructive criticism and things you liked and things you enjoyed in the book.
But please, after listening to this interview, do not write Greg an email and ask him how Jim Simons trades.
You can ask, but I'll send you to the book.
Good deal. Hey, Greg, thank you for coming on, and hopefully we can catch up for the next book, because a guy like you is always got another one coming.
That was a lot of fun.
I see a time when those awake will understand how to make money in up, down, and surprise markets. Whether new trader or experienced, college student or financial advisor, protecting against a crash or just trying to make a lot of money, trend following offers everyone an answer in uncertain times. To get started immediately, send me an email, michael@covel.com. I will send you the right trend following steps to take along with my free video. But if you want to buy and hold, trust the government and trust Wall Street, this is absolutely not for you.